there does seem to be a lot of hatred of Jews on X.
Yeah.
How much of it do you think is actual hate of Jews, and how much of it is just trolls and grifters and conspiracy nerds just, cosplaying as Nazis?
It's really hard to tell. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you even figure it out. And I think this is one of the problems with outrage culture. It's kind of one of the unintended consequences of it, is that now you just have no way of knowing who's saying this just to get a rise out of you, or who really sincerely means it, or who's some version of both. Then there's also, it's like there's so many weird dynamics, because there's no question, like, I see it all the time. I mean, I see a level of like Jew hatred on Twitter that I've never seen before in my own replies and other people's things. Like, and that's interesting. Like, first off, you're like, okay, so what's going on here?
Interesting sociological phenomenon, yeah.
Right. Yeah, concerning and troubling and all of that stuff. But then you also see people who will be asking like completely legitimate questions or making completely legitimate points that are called anti-Semitic. And then that, I think, does not help the dynamic at all, because now you're almost like, oh, there's number one, you just kind of, you make the word meaningless. You take away the disincentive for anybody else to actually be a Jew hater. I mean, I think there's a lot going on. One of the things is that for young white men in America today, they've lived through the years of real insane progressive wokeism. And so, which is something like I'm 42. It's just a different thing for me. Like, I come from a different culture and a different time. That is just simply was not the case that when I was a teenager, or when I was in college, or when I was in my early 20s, that the school, the faculty, the politicians, Hollywood, all of them embraced racialism. They all said we're playing identity politics, and it is okay to dice people up along these racial lines and have that first and foremost in your mind, And there is this weird feeling over this last year, and now with Trump being reelected, that like we snapped our fingers and wokeism went away or something like that. But these guys still came up in this era, and it was always the case that like one of the dangerous elements of playing this game was like, well, you think you're going to play this, and that like young straight white men aren't going to start playing this game too? Why the hell would they not? Like, why would they just accept, we'll just sit here while everybody else is allowed to have a racial identity and a grievance about it, and yet we'll be the one group who, yeah, you could just stomp all over us. We're the bad guys. And that's part of the reason why I always opposed the woke insanity. I mean, first and foremost, just because I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong to like be shitty to people based on their racial group, and that includes white people too. But then also you're like, you don't see that this is gonna result in something bad. So there's that. But I mean, clearly, and it was weird to me is that I guess it's because a lot of the people who are the most upset about the anti-Semitism also happen to be supporting Israel. Like, there's a big correlation between that. But clearly, that's a huge factor in this. Like, it's not a coincidence that all of this rose up while Israel is just conducting this brutal campaign with our weapons and money. And so I always think with these things, whether it's with Putin or with Al-Qaeda or with whoever, and I'm not saying like the guy who posts like Jew hating stuff on Twitter is the same as them. I'm just saying in all of these situations, you always kind of got to separate like what are legitimate grievances and what are like, okay, that's, you're wrong on that and you shouldn't be doing that. Like, so it's pretty easy for me to like, if I listen to like the Putin interview with Tucker, I thought his whole 30-minute opening thing was like horrible and just like kind of stupid, especially when you're talking to Tucker Carlson. This is like for an American audience. You know how much that does not resonate with Americans being like, we have a historic claim over another our entire society is founded on, we think that's bullshit. Like, that's the entire history of our society. Is like, nah, it doesn't matter. Sorry. Like, literally read the Declaration of Independence. It just refutes everything Vladimir Putin said in the first 30 minutes. Like, our view of the world is that God wants us to be free. Mm-hmm. And we get to overthrow governments if they're infringing on our rights. Like, that was stupid. But then when he's talking about like, NATO enlargement and bringing Ukraine into the American military alliance. You're like, okay, he's got a legitimate point there. We would not allow one of our neighbors to be brought into China or Russia's military alliance. And so likewise, when it comes to those guys, I do think that like you almost look, it is just true. It is the case that America has fought many wars over the last 7 years, with Israel playing a very influential role in us fighting those wars. And, these were, this was like a scheme that was cooked up by the neoconservatives and the Likudniks in Israel that we would go through this path. But this has been confirmed by 4-star General Wesley Clark. He literally said it was a study paid for by the Israelis that we were going to topple 7 countries in 5 years. And we didn't get there in 5 years, but we've made attempts to topple all of those countries since then. You see, Trump's bombing the Houthis because they're pissed off about Israel's treatment of the Palestinians, and so they're trying to shut down their straits or whatever. And it's like, so we're just bombing another group on behalf of Israel. And if you really are concerned about the rise of Jew hatred, I would say, like, look, it's much like, sometimes people would argue where, the thing I said in the beginning about the terrorists don't hate us for our freedom, they hate us because we're over there. And people would say, that's just what Osama bin Laden says. He just says he hates us for our military, but he really just hates us because he's an Islamist and we're free people or whatever. And you'd be like, okay, well, even if that's what's in his heart, that sure is his recruiting shtick. That sure is how he gets other people to blow themselves up. And so even if you want to say, which might very well be the case, that some of these people just hate Jews, and it wouldn't matter if Israel was at war with Gaza or not. It's like, okay, but that sure is their recruiting shtick. That sure is how they get other people to go look at what these Jews are doing in our foreign policy. So I don't know. There's a lot going on. I do think, I think racialism of all different forms is stupid and wrong. It always just leads to sloppy thinking and bad results. It's always kind of ugly. And then weirdly, it also always ends up hurting the person. Like, it's not good for you. It's not good for your soul. So I don't like seeing that stuff. But then I also think, like I was saying before about there's like this hierarchy of outrages that you got to have in order to think and act. You have to kind of put these together. And, I just hear a little bit. It's something that despite being described as a self-hating Jew, I am really not. I love Jewish people. I love Jewish culture. I've benefited a lot from it. It's in many ways made me the person I am, and I think it's influenced some of the best parts of me. But there is like a whininess and a hysteria about this stuff that I think is just like not healthy. I think it's not good. I've told many Jewish friends and family this privately, but it's like, the way I look at it is like, I'm an American. This has been a wonderful country to be Jewish. Jews are doing exceptionally well in this country. We are 2% of the population or so, and we are thriving by any metric. And if mean stuff on Twitter is our great burden to bear, I don't think we should be talking about it like we're in the middle of Nazi Germany or something like that. So I do think people get hysterical about it.
In a way that's completely not productive. But to me, I think of the Jew-hating nerds and trolls on Twitter as just the other side of the woke leftists.
I kind of get that, yeah.
It's almost like a response, like you were saying. It's just that the woke weren't censored, and the response to the woke was censored. And now that on X, they're less censored or not censored, you just get to see it. And they're both annoying.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They don't really help the discussion on Israel. They don't help the discussion on anything. In fact, one of the reasons I stay away from that discussion of Israel, which I think is nuanced and really complicated in the way that we've been discussing, in order to have an intellectual exploration of ideas, you have to be able to misstep and try ideas for size. And if I'm going to be punished severely by these, I'm okay being criticized, but when there's low brain takes that are just lying about me en masse, it gets a huge amount of engagement just because you're thinking out loud and reading history, and it's just annoying. And by the way, I'm really interested about World War II, probably in the way that Dan Carlin and Daryl Cooper are interested, because it's such an interesting stage on which human nature was explored in all its forms, the geopolitics of it. Everybody on that stage was complicated. There's a lot of fascinating military tactics and strategy and military technology, plus the nuclear bomb, all of that. That's
Yep.
like a moment in human history. Listen, I love Genghis Khan, Roman Empire, Alexander the Great. Those are all interesting studies of human history, of military tactics, of brutality, of human nature, all of that. That's why I want to be able to discuss that. It's fascinating, like that humans are able to do that kind of thing. What causes them to do it? What were the dynamics involved? The propaganda on all sides. Could it been avoided or not? Plus Stalin is part of this picture.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck? What? Like, you don't get characters. You don't get after the nuclear bomb. You're just not going to get characters like that. You're not going to get a global war of that kind. It might be a different one, maybe a cyber war, or maybe a war in space. But we're not going to get this kind of war ever again. That was the biggest and the last global war we're going to get. So I want to be able to like mouth off and explore, and argue with Daryl Cooper about Churchill and say stupid shit in the process. And Daryl says stupid shit in the process too. And like together come up to the. So anyway, the trolls on the left and the right just make everything worse, and it's annoying.
No, I agree with that, and I'm sure, like, I'm sure I'm not without my own bias in this because but from my own, like, self-interested perspective, I'm not saying, like, this is the main reason to be annoyed with them or anything like that, but what I personally get is all types of, like, self-hating Jew,
Yep.
Nazi apologists, all this, literally just because I criticize the way Israel's conducting this war, so I think that's, like, insane, but then I also feel like, and I'm not, listen, I want to be clear and disclaim this, I'm not saying this is the worst thing about people who are Jew haters on Twitter, but just from a personal perspective, I'm like, guys, you are not helping me, man. Like, it's like I'll get people in my comments who I think are trying to like catch my back who just don't know I'm Jewish. And then like I'll say something critical of Israel, and then someone will argue with me and they'll be like, oh, look, a Jew came in here to defend Israel. And I'm like, dude, first of all, do you you're like literally, you might as well be working for Mossad. You literally you make the movement who's criticizing Israel look terrible, dude. Like you are literally the enemy that they would like to have. And so there's a very weird dynamic in the Israel-Palestine conflict where all of there's so many of the loons on both sides who almost seem like they're secretly working for the other side. Like when you
Yeah.
see the Palestinian protests
Yeah.
and they're chanting death to America and all this stuff, you're like, what are you doing? Are you trying to make people more sympathetic to Israel? Because that's if Rabbi Shmuley was working for Adolf Hitler or something like that, it would all make perfect sense. You were like, oh, I get it. You sent this guy out to make everyone hate Jewish people. And then like there's just a very, and then with the Jew hating post too, it's just it just feeds right into the opposition side of how to caricature. It's like, oh, so their game is they'll smear everybody who's a critic of Israel as being a Jew hater. So your answer is to just really be a Jew hater. Like, all right, I don't think that's helping.